Okay, so for this one, yesterday we were doing 2 and 4 terms. 2 terms was all pretty specific of it's either greatest common factor or it's the difference of perfect squares. 4 terms, all factor by grouping, just grouping the first 2 terms together, the last 2 terms together, and then after that, it's all just GCF for everything. As we're going through the parts of that one. So here's what we're going to do today. If the grouping by 4 terms works pretty well, and everybody was okay with everything we were doing here, we're going to do 3 terms where the first factor or the first term is not 1. So basically, we've got something like this where it's ax squared plus bx plus c. Example of what that one would look like, and this is the first one that we'll do here. We'll go with 2x squared. Oh, sorry. There we go. Plus 11x plus 12. Okay, and any of these things we're factoring, whether it's 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, the first thing you always look for is a greatest common factor first. If this had been a 10, then we could have divided everything by 2, and then we would actually been back over here to what we would do on this side. But for now, we don't have a greatest common factor, so that part's gone. So we're going to do the grouping method or the AC method. Everybody calls it something different. Most people call it the AC method because the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply your A value, which in this case is 2, times 12. Okay, so if we do 2 times 12, that's going to be a positive 24. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look for the factors of positive 24 whose sum is going to equal this b term in the middle. Okay, so we're going to start off with an a times c. And then again, whatever that number is, we're going to look for the factors of this thing whose sum is going to equal the b term in the middle. That way we're using all 3 terms for this part of it. Okay, now here's the big thing, and this is on here twice because it's kind of a big thing. It says the sign of the b term always goes with the bigger factor. So if we're doing the factors of 24, it start off kind of easy. You know, it's 1 times 24. And whatever this sign is with the b term, the bigger number will always have that exact same sign. And you may be like, well, they're all positive. Okay, if they're all positive, it doesn't matter because everything's going to be positive. It's when we get the negatives involved that we have to kind of check that one. Okay, and then to get the sign of the other term here, for the other factor, you just divide these 2 numbers. If it's a positive divided by positive, well, that means the one would also be positive. Okay, and what we're doing is we're looking for the pair that when we put them together, their sum or their difference is going to add up to 11. Well, 1 and 24, not going to get us there. 2 and 12, 14, getting closer. 3 and 8. Okay, those 2 will add up to 11, so that's the 2 numbers that we're looking for. Okay, now and here's where everybody teaches it a little bit different, and this is actually different than the way I taught it last year, just because if we do it this way, it winds up being the same thing as factor by grouping. So what you're going to do then is you're going to take this 11x that we're adding this up as, and you're going to replace the 11x with these 2 numbers. We're going to replace that with a positive 3x and a positive 8x because we're going to take 11x and break it up as 8 plus 3x or 8x plus 3x. The 2 terms we've got here, well, they'll just stay the same. So now we've gone from something with 3 terms to something with 4 terms, and now we're going to do factor by grouping because we've got 4 terms now. So we're going to group the first 2 terms together. We're going to group the last 2 terms together. And then we'll put the plus sign in the middle. Okay, and that way now there's nothing really new. It's just the same thing we were doing yesterday. 2x squared and 3x, the only thing they have in common is an x. Take 1x out here, make that 2x, take the x out there, and it's just a 3. And if you're confident with this, we know that this number should also be the same thing for this parentheses. So if it's 8 and 12, we're dividing them both by 4, so that means our common factor there would be 4. Okay, and what we said yesterday is that as long as these 2 things are the same, To get our next part of the answer, we're just going to bring this common factor and this common factor in the parentheses here. And then the part we had repeated will just fall in behind it. And then that's the answer that we're looking for. Question. Go ahead, Maya.
Can you explain that part again, the factor plus 24?
Okay. So with some negatives. Now, the negatives are the ones where you have to actually think a little bit. Or do we want one more positive first? One more positive first?
Negative.
Throw the negative. All right, we'll throw the negative in there. Okay. All right, so for example 2. Let's do a 12x squared minus 5x minus 3. Okay, again, no greatest common factor, so there's nothing we can do with that part. If that first term was x squared, we'll show you the easier thing we would do. But for now, we've got the easy part we'll do for this thing. So we're going to do 12 times negative 3. Again, we're going to multiply those two numbers. That's a negative 36, and we'll put that way up here so we got it. It's going to be a negative 36. Again, we need the factors of negative 36, whose sum is going to add up to this b term in the middle, so we need the sum to add up to negative 5. Okay, now if you're not good with your factoring skills, and some of you aren't just because of how things go, this is one where, again, you can use your calculator. But hopefully everybody's okay with knowing that if it's 1 in 36, that's always the first set we could possibly use. All right, now, and use this one just to make sure you get your signs correct. So again, this says the sign of the b term will always go with the bigger factor. So this is the b term here, negative 5. That number has to go with the bigger factor. To find this sign, we're going to divide these two numbers. What happens when you divide a negative 36 by a negative 36? Or a positive 1, right? So anytime we're doing these, the bigger, so if we do 2 and 18, the bigger factor will always be negative, the smaller factor will always be positive. If we do 3 and 12, same thing, negative, positive. If we do 4 and 9, negative, positive. 5 does, if you check it, 36 divided by 5 doesn't work. We could get 6. And somebody may say, well, what do we do in that case if we've got 6 and 6? Okay, there's not a bigger positive, negative thing on this one. They're the same. So it doesn't really matter, but just to be consistent, we'll put a plus there and a minus there. Okay, so which pair could add up to negative 5? Got to be the 4 and the 9, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to replace this negative 5x with plus 4x and minus 9x. And again, which one you put first, it doesn't matter. If you put the negative 9x first and the positive 4x second, that's fine. It doesn't matter the order you put these in. You just need to replace this negative 5 with 4 minus 9. Okay, and then the other two terms in the front and the end, they'll stay the same. We're just replacing this middle term. Okay, and it's factor by grouping. So we're going to group the first two together, group the last two together. And again, main thing is when you do this, when you always need a plus sign in the middle, regardless of what this sign is with this term, you always need a plus sign in the middle just to get that separation there. Okay, I'm going to have to put this over here because I'm running out of room. So if it's 12x squared and 4x, what is our greatest common factor, number-wise? All right, we can divide them both by 4, and they both have an x, correct? So let's take out an x. So we've got 12 divided by 4 would be 3x. 4 divided by 4 would be 1. And we need that 1 there for a placeholder because we've got to have two terms. We've got two terms in the parentheses here. You must have two terms in the parentheses here. Okay, if it's negative 9 and negative 3, what do they both have in common? Okay, got a negative, we can divide them both by 3, correct? So we're going to take out a negative and a 3. So if we do negative 9 divided by negative 3, that's a positive 3x. If we do a negative 3 divided by negative 3, that's a positive 1. Okay, now, and if some, okay, so then again, if you'd taken out just a positive 3 and you'd had a negative 3x and a negative 1, you'd have the right numbers, but not the correct sign. So that's where, again, if the numbers are correct, but the signs are wrong, that means you either need to take out a negative or you took out a negative when you shouldn't have taken out a negative. So it's just a matter of working those around. So same thing here, same thing here. So then we'll pull the 4x minus 3 together in one parentheses, and then the 3x plus 1 in a different parentheses behind it. Okay, one more of those, just to make sure we got it. Because the other ones that we'll do, they'll go really quick. They'll be really easy and really pretty fast as we go through those. Okay, and I'm out of room on that one, so I have to put this on a separate piece of paper just because we got there. If you've got room, you can leave it there. If you don't have room, I guess you could put this on with the paper we had yesterday. We'll do the special cases, just wherever you want to put it. If you need it, if you don't need this one, if you don't have room, again, this is just me kind of put the one more out there. So. Okay, so again, ax squared plus bx plus c, where the a value is not going to be 1. So let's go with 2x squared. Let's do a minus 15, and then let's do a plus 7x. So 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. Okay, again, no greatest common factor. So very first thing we do is we're going to multiply 2 times negative 15 and make that a negative 30. So we need the factors of negative 30, where the sum is going to equal positive 7. Okay. Again, just use the 1 and the number just to get the signs correct, because again, if you get the signs correct, everything else should fall into place. We've got a positive 7. Bigger number needs to be a positive. If we divide a negative 30 and a positive 30, what kind of 1 does that give us? What a negative. If you're not sure, just double check it real quick. Again, negative 30 divided by a positive 30, they get you a negative 1. Remember, multiply and divide. One negative makes the answer negative. You know, two negatives would make the answer positive. In that case, we've got one negative, so that one would have to be negative there. All right, so then if we go through our numbers, we've got 2 and 15. So if we do 30 minus 1, that would be 29. That's not going to work. 15 minus 2 is 13. That's not going to work. If we do 3 times 10, 10 minus 3 is 7, so that's the pair that we're looking for. Okay, now, and here's kind of one way, if you can write it out like this is where it's kind of good. So what we're going to do then is where we have this 7x, we're going to replace this 7x with a negative 3x and a plus 10x. And that's where I wish I had a little bit more room on that blue paper to kind of do this one. So if you can write it like that, where you write your factors here, you can see now that I'm going to take this positive 7x, I'm going to replace it with either negative 3 plus 10, or if I do 10 minus 3, that's fine. And then the first term and the last term just stay right where they are. Because if we do 10 minus 3, that would be 7, so we can simplify that one. But again, we've got our 4 terms here, so we're going to group the first 2 together, group the last 2 together, and put a plus in the middle. Okay, and from this point, again, it's all just greatest common factor stuff. 2x squared and 3x. 2 and 3, nothing we've got there, just the x. 10 and 15, you can divide them both by 5. So again, we've got the same thing here and here, which is what we will need. So then we'll bring the x and the 5 here. And then just put the 2x minus 3 behind it. Okay, and again, I like that visual where if you do the factors right underneath it, you can see then we're going to take this 7x and replace it with these two numbers. So it's just -3 plus 10. And then we're just doing factor by grouping from there. All right, so back to the blue sheet here. On the other side, 3 terms. If the first term is equal to 1, there's an even shorter way to get the answer that we're looking for. Still put the terms in descending order. You still look for a greatest common factor. And for this one, all you're going to do is you're going to find the factors of this C term, just like we did, whose sum equals the B term. But there's a great shortcut to this one because you don't have to do the factor by grouping. So if we start off with x squared plus 7x plus 12. So if that was easy, this is even easier. This is like even better. So we're looking for the factors of positive 12, whose sum is going to equal positive 7. Now, the great news is if they're all positive, the work gets easier. Because we don't really have to worry about the signs because we know all the numbers are going to be positive. 1 plus 12 is not 7. 2 plus 6 is 8, not 7. So that means it's got to be 3 and 4, correct? Okay. Now, here's the great thing if that first term is 1. Basically, instead of splitting this up and doing factor by grouping, which is what you're technically supposed to do, but here's the great thing. If the first term is 1, we know we're looking for 2 sets of parentheses. It's just going to be x and x, and then whatever these two numbers are, that's your answer. That you don't have to do the factor by grouping. You can just say, okay, once I've got my factors, that's it. I'll just put these two numbers in here in my parentheses, and then I'm done. So let's go x squared plus 19x plus 60. And then we'll throw a few negatives at you. All right, so again, factors of 60, where the sum is going to equal positive 19. Again, they're all positive, which makes life even easier for this thing because we don't have to worry about any signs being different. We know that all the answers are going to be positive. It's not 1 and 60. It's not 2 and 30. It's not 3 and 10. Sorry, 3 and 20. But it is 4 and 15. Okay, so we're going to put an x plus 4 and an x plus 15. Again, which one you put first doesn't matter. If you do x plus 15 and then x plus 4, that's fine. Okay, and again, the only thing you really have to be careful of for these is just with your negatives. So if you have x squared plus 2x minus 24. All right, so it's the factors of negative 24. We need the sum to equal positive 2. Okay, and again, when you've got your negatives involved, just use your first. We know it's not going to be 1 and 24 in this case because the answer is not 23. If we're subtracting these two, it would be 23. If we're adding these together, it would be 25. So we know it's not going to be 1 and 24. But we just need to have it so our signs are correct. The B term is positive, so the bigger number is still positive. So again, we're still going back to this box over here. So this B term, sign is positive. That means that term, that sign has to go with the bigger factor. And again, to get the other number, you divide a negative 24 and a positive 24. If you're still not positive with your negatives or certain of your negatives, that's where you just take a negative 24 and you divide it by a positive 24. Tells you that answer's got to be a negative 1. So the 24 is going to be positive, the 1's going to be negative, which means if we do 2 and 12, the bigger number will always be positive, the smaller number will always be negative. And as long as you stick with a pattern of smaller number on the left, bigger number on the right, the signs will always stay the same way. All right, the pair that gives you 2, it's got to be the 6 and the 4. So that's x minus 4 and then x plus 6. Oh, just because it's negative right here. That even if we did the AC method, technically the AC method, this is a 1. So if you do 1 times negative 24, it's still just going to be a negative 24. Okay. And that's the shortcut, is that with the A term being 1, even when you do 1 times negative 24, it's still just going to be that number. So that's the shortcut part of this one that makes this thing go a little bit easier. Okay, and then one more of those. And let's go with x squared. So let's go with x squared minus 14x plus 40. Okay, so factors of positive 40. Well, sum's going to equal negative 14. Okay, so we know if we use 1 and 40, we're not going to get 14. But again, all we're trying to do in this case with the 1 and the number is get the signs correct. The B term is negative, so the bigger number has to be negative. If you divide a positive 40 by a negative 40, it's going to be a negative 1. So now both factors are going to be negative. So if we use 2 and 20, again, both negative. If you check 40 divided by 3, it doesn't go. If you check 40 divided by 4, that's going to be 4 and 10. So there's the pair that's going to add up to negative 14. So this will be an x minus 4 and an x minus 10. And if you want to put this just off to the side somewhere, if we had this extra one back here, even the notes from yesterday where we did this one, there's one more special case for this one. Okay, so this is a special case trinomial. All right, so let's say it is 36x squared plus 90x plus 81. Okay, now what makes this thing special is, again, now if you go back and look at this one, because most time the first thing people are going to do, they're going to do 36 times 81. And you're going to do that, and you're going to go, all right, that's 36 times 81, and that is 2,916. And you're like, wait, what? You're like, you want to do what? Do I want to do the factors of 2,916 and go through all the factors on that one? Absolutely not. So here's what you're going to do. Here's what makes this a special case. Notice the first term is a perfect square number, right? 6 times 6. Notice your last number, also a perfect square. 9 times 9. Okay, so if you get one, especially if the numbers are big, if you do the AC method and you go, whoa, 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 that's 2,916. What's going on here? So if you notice these first and last two terms are perfect square numbers, all you have to do is say, all right, here's what we're going to do. If we guess on this thing, just like we did, you know how we did the difference of perfect squares yesterday with this one with two terms, how that if this was a perfect square number and this was a perfect square number, we just took the square roots of those numbers and put them on the parentheses. This one's that exact same thing, that if those are perfect square numbers, we can put 6 and 6, we can put 9 and 9. Okay, and then all you have to do to check is this. Go ahead and do, oh wait, I may put the wrong number in the middle. That is 6 times 9 is 54. I did put the wrong number in the middle. 6 times 9 is 54. That's supposed to be 108. Oops, my bad. Change that number. My bad. had something in my head and I wrote something down wrong. So I was making this one up. It popped in my head when I needed this case. All right, so it's 36x squared plus 108x. So if you add these two numbers together and this number equals your b term here, you've got a shortcut, so then this thing works. So since this thing appears twice, we're going to do 6x plus 9 squared. Again, I apologize for that one. I had the wrong number in my head when I put these two things together. I was thinking, instead of doing 6 times 9, I was thinking 5 times 9 to get 45, not 54. All right, now somebody may be asking, what if that number here had been 90 and not 108 like you had originally? Then probably in that case, that's going to be a prime number, because I'm not expecting you to take 2,916 and go through all the different numbers on that one until you find the numbers that's going to add up to be 90. So if that does happen to be 90 instead of 108 here, then again, that's probably going to be a prime problem where it does not factor and you do not have to worry about it.